Welcome to another episode of the Sports Sentiment. I am your host, Nick Urias, and we are back once again talking college football. We are 3 days out from the college football season officially kicking off in Dublin, Ireland, between Iowa State and Kansas State. It's finally here. We've been talking about the games, the fall camps, all of the depth charts, and who's emerging within all of these respective football rosters, and who are the guys to watch out for, and who's winning the quarterback battles. Well, that's going to all finally be put to bed in a sense because we're going to finally play the games. We're less than 3 days away. I feel like I've been looking at the same damn board for 4 months, and I feel like I have a pretty good feel on these 5 games in week 0 just because we've been staring at these games for so long. Iowa State and Kansas State to kick things off in Dublin, Ireland. Fresno State at Kansas. Kansas playing back at their home stadium after it getting renovated. Idaho State and UNLV. Sam Houston State and Western Kentucky. That one in Bowling Green, Kentucky. And then rounding it all off on the island, Stanford and Hawaii. Rightfully so. The Hawaii game should be last. I was having a little bit of a conversation, just amongst, my peers amongst the Mountain West and, just leading up to week 0. And we're like, how come is the Hawaii game so early? 4:30 Pacific. I just feel like that game deserves to be at like 8 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. You kick things off at 5 p.m. Hawaiian. There's probably got to do something with the TV networks, and there's probably a whole bunch of things behind the scenes that are out of the fans' control. But regardless, I thought the game should have been a little bit earlier. It's week 0. I think all these teams should have a standalone window within their games. It's just more eyeballs, especially if you're like the Conference USA or if you're a team like Idaho State going to play UNLV. Wouldn't you want that standalone window where it's like, okay, we get a half at the very least isolated to ourselves? I don't know, because it's going to be all eyes on Iowa State, Kansas State to start out 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'll be watching it. The whole world will be watching it. That's all fine and dandy. But then you're going to have when the Fresno State and Kansas game starts, you're going to have that game. Then it's going to be overlapping between the UNLV game. And then all the Conference USA maniacs will be watching their game. I don't know. As a college football fan, someone that wants to get eyes on as many games as possible, for only having 5 games throughout the entirety of the day, I feel like we could have spaced it out. But again, that's probably out of my control when it's all said and done. But look, today we're going to talk about the games. We're going to give a little bit of a breakdown. I'm going to give my angles on what I think are going to be some advantages to some teams heading in. Remember, it's week 0. Everybody and all these teams are utilizing the transfer portal now. To a sense, we kind of really don't know what we're going to get from these teams, and that's the beauty of this. I'm going to probably get some things wrong here. Everybody's going to sound like an expert when they talk about it, but you know what? Look, that's the beauty of the sport. That's what makes college football so great. It's the rivalries. It's Farmageddon. I don't necessarily agree with it being in Dublin, Ireland, but it's a rivalry game to start out the season. You absolutely love that. We got a whole bunch of new storylines, new head coaches. You got Dan Mullen at UNLV. You got Matt Entz at Fresno State. You got 3 Mountain West schools. I know there's a lot of buzz with Hawaii this year. Their goal is to make a bowl game. And we've talked about that a bunch with the Hawaii Rainbow Warriors this year. We even got to talk to their players at Mountain West Media Days. There's just a lot of fun storylines within these teams that are playing this weekend. Heck, my favorite game on the entire slate might be the game that nobody gives a damn about, and that's Sam Houston State and Western Kentucky, because the teams just look so fun the way that their coaching staffs align. So we're going to talk about all these games. We'll start out with the first one with Iowa State and Kansas State in Dublin, Ireland. It's the 109th edition of Farmageddon, which is rivalry game. I just said, it's a rivalry game. I'd much rather it be played on home campuses. But the fact that we're getting a high-stakes game like this that's going to count towards the conference records, I think is always good early on in the season. Whoever wins this game is just going to have a massive advantage, when we look back on it in week 8 and we're into conference play, especially in the Big 12. The Big 12 is completely wide open this year. I mean, flip a coin on flip an 8-sided coin for that matter on who's going to win the Big 12 this year, because you could really make a case for a bunch of different teams, whether it be Iowa State or Kansas State or Utah with Devin Dampier and bringing in the New Mexico offensive coordinator. Those two guys are very well connected from their time in Albuquerque last year, top 5 offense in all of college football last year. Houston under Willie Fritz. Baylor, they're supposed to be doing some big things, or at least the people think out there in Waco, Texas believe so, right? Of course, Arizona State, who was picked last in the Big 12 preseason polls last year and it ended up winning the league and then ended up almost nearly upsetting Texas in the college football playoff. Like, there is just so many teams in the Big 12. BYU with Barrett Bachmeier and company. There are a lot of teams in the Big 12 where you could really make a case like, okay, this is a team. We didn't even get to the Texas Tech team, who just spent millions of dollars on their roster for the NIL. So there is just so many angles within the Big 12. I think that's what makes this game so big. That's why so many people are talking about it, not only because it's the rivalry game, not only because it's in Dublin, Ireland to kick off the season, but because of the stakes of the Big 12 this year. There is a lot of value for this game, and it being so early in week 0, this could flip the entire standings upside down when you get into tiebreakers and things within that nature. But for it being a rivalry game, Iowa State has actually won this battle 5 of the last 7 times. They even won last year in Ames, and that game was an ugly game in the cold. It was about 14 degrees. I remember watching the game late at night, and it looked like a game for Avery Johnson, who's back at quarterback for Kansas State this year. Looked uncomfortable. And quite honestly, Avery Johnson, I thought, for all of the preseason hype that he got last year, disappointed a little bit. I mean, this was a guy that a lot of people were chalking him up like, hey, I got him as a dark horse Heisman candidate. And he really didn't reach those expectations. A lot of people were expecting him to do a lot more things with his arm last year. We'll see if he does so this season. He's got some talented wide receivers. Obviously, the backfield was terrific with Giddens, who's not on this team anymore, but they still have Dylan Edwards. Not to mention Avery Johnson in his own right is damn good with his legs. So between Avery Johnson and Dylan Edwards, that is a pretty good 1-2 tandem as far as dudes that can make things happen on the fly with their legs. Dylan Edwards, obviously the former Colorado Buffalo, back with the Wildcats this year. And then Avery Johnson, he just needs to take that next step. The thing is with Avery Johnson is, like we said, he has really good with his legs, but I want him in the fourth quarter to make some bigger plays. And we kind of saw that a little bit in Boulder. We definitely saw that in the Little Apple, out there in Manhattan, Kansas. But I'm looking for him in the true road games. In a game like this in Dublin, Ireland, overseas, can you make a big play for me in the fourth quarter? I'm not necessarily so sure about that yet. He's got to prove it because he hasn't really showcased that with the whole sample size of a season last year, where he was the full-on QB1 to this roster. Now, Rocco Becht on the other side for Iowa State. This is a guy that had a terrific season last year, went to the Big 12 championship game. Obviously, the championship game a letdown. Arizona State's defense was just all over this guy, but still, this is a guy that's just racking up the starts. There's really no competition over there, out there in Ames, Iowa, as far as the QB1 spot is concerned. But Becht last year, 3,500 passing yards, 23 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. They got a terrific running back in Carson Hansen coming back. I'd expect this guy to have a potential 1,000-yard season. So there's a lot to like here with the Iowa State side of things. They have a lot of returning production, which is something that I like, especially if your team was good last year. Their defense, their linebackers are a massive strength. I would say that's probably the strength of their defense. All of their linebackers come back. They only had like a few guys that graduated last year, but they didn't really get hit by the portal all so hard. The Iowa State defense is always one of the top units in the Big 12. I mean, Utah's defense is always good. I expect Baylor and BYU's offense to be good. We'll see what Texas Tech looks like in their, basically NIL all-star team. We'll see what it looks like. But Iowa State in Matt Campbell at head coach, which, I mean, this was a guy that, Ohio State was potentially trying to get, while all the Ryan Day stuff was kind of hanging up in the air because he couldn't beat Michigan the last 4 years. Matt Campbell was in the conversation for the Ohio State job, which just, I think, speaks volume on what he brings as a head coach. And this is a guy that's really well respected. He's out there in Ames, Iowa. Iowa State, not the most flashiest team in the world, right? And I mean, this is a guy that, he just goes out there and wins football games, which is something that you personally got to respect a whole bunch. So, for the Cyclones, I like them in this game. I think this ultimately comes down to, in week 0, who do you trust more? Do you trust Avery Johnson or do you trust Rocco Becht? And I saw more winning plays out of Iowa State last year than compared to Kansas State. And I know that probably sounds dumb to say because these are new rosters in a sense, but at the same time, not really, because this is, at the end of the day, a rivalry game. These teams know each other tremendously well. And for the most part, the same cast of characters coming back outside of a couple positions here and there and a couple players that are going to be introduced into this thing. I just think in this sort of format of a game in week 0, being on a neutral site, if this game was in the Little Apple, I'd be taking Kansas State all day. But on a neutral where home field advantage in a sense is not going to really matter. I don't know what the fan base is, who's traveling out there. I just trust Iowa State more. I think this game is going to be low scoring. I think the Cyclones will win 24-20, something along those lines. So I'm just very interested to see how that, materializes, because I think this is going to be a more of a low scoring game. These teams know each other very well, like I said. And I think Iowa State will just make one more play in the fourth quarter compared to the other team in Kansas State. And ultimately, I think this will be a game that you'll be glued to from start to finish on your TV. As far as the Big 12 is concerned, who knows? These teams, over the course of the Big 12 schedule, could completely go in drastically different directions. And a lot of people like Kansas State this year to do some big things in the Big 12, and along with Iowa State. So these are two very talented teams. I think they're both on a neutral site. I would say they're both pretty equivalent to each other. That's why, you see Kansas State's a 3-point favorite here, but both these teams are very well respected. They got talent all over the place. And, with it being a rivalry game and, just past history with Matt Campbell, I just think he'll have his guys a little bit more ready and Rocco Becht a little bit more poised for the moment, which I personally like in this matchup. As far as the other ball game, the second one, Fresno State at Kansas. So this is a game that's got, some pretty interesting storylines, as do all of these games, right? Because you got your first-year head coach in Matt Entz at Fresno State. He'll be taking his team and his talents on the road to Jayhawk Stadium out there in Lawrence, Kansas. Kansas Jayhawks last year. This was a team that, again, in the Big 12, right? This is another one of those teams you could just throw in on the 8-sided coin on a team in a sense that people like because of, the quarterback and Jalen Daniels, 6th year at the collegiate level now. The kid is very talented. Again, mobile, can make things happen with his legs, improvising on the fly. This is a guy that you want. The problem is with him, it wasn't not the case last year, but the key for him was always staying on the field. And last year, he actually played every game and started every game, which was a big step in the right direction. The problem was his teams got off to a slow start. They started out 1-5. They finished the season 5-7 overall. They caught fire in the second half, which is something I always like. A team that, starts out slow, but catches fire and does really good to end the season. And then for the most part, they kind of bring back the same guys and, a positive morale boost with a lot of the same pieces coming in. You got Jalen Daniels, you got some returners on defense. Offensively, the skill position, there's a whole lot new coming in here. Kansas is losing their number 1 rusher in program history in Devin Neal. They lose their top 6 receivers. So in a sense, that angle might not work. But hey, they're bringing back Lance Leipold, that head coach, and they're bringing back Jalen Daniels, and he'll most certainly rally the troops here. They bring, as far as the wide receivers that are making plays for the Jayhawks, Cam Pickett, he came from Ball State. Emmanuel Henderson from Alabama, which is a plus for this Jayhawk program because they weren't getting recruits like this, a few years back. And Brian Canty from Columbia, so they bring in a scholar in their own right. at the wide receiver position as well. Look, Kansas, they're again, they're going to be one of these teams that are in the conversation. Defensively, I really don't know what this team's going to look like, because defensively they were terrible in the first half of the season, and all of a sudden they start forcing all these turnovers, especially when they went on their little heater at the end of the year to beat 3 straight ranked opponents in Iowa State, BYU, and Colorado. So, and they were winning a bunch of low scoring games. So their defense definitely got a whole lot more comfortable. And, for the most part, offensively, they were scuffling a little bit. This team, compared to a few years ago, I mean, I remember when they went toe-to-toe with Caleb Williams, a few years back when he was at Oklahoma. And the game was absolutely nuts. That was the Caleb Williams. That was not the Caleb Williams Heisman year. That's when he still had Lincoln Riley. But Caleb Williams was like bursting onto the scene. And it was like 42-41. Like, it was a crazy game. And, those were the crazy Kansas teams that kind of they were an all offense, no defense type team. Last year was definitely kind of the opposite, especially when they started playing a little bit better. As far as this game is concerned, like Fresno State, so they got the first year head coach in Matt Entz. Fresno State will be starting EJ Warner, who's been a Temple Owl and a Rice Owl his whole collegiate career. Now he's got some big shoes to fill here. No offense, but Temple and Rice are not the same as Fresno State. Like, the fan base, like we've talked about during our live streams, throughout the past couple weeks, the fan base will be louder if he doesn't perform. In a few weeks, next thing you know, they're going to be calling Carson Conklin's name and, to ultimately take over QB1 role here in the Central Valley. So, the pressure is not necessarily on in a game like this, because Fresno State's not expected to win this game, but you do want to see some productivity within this offense. Fresno State's going to run the ball a lot. This is what Matt Entz teams typically do. In particular, that at North Dakota State, when he was the head coach and he coached Trey Lance and Cam Miller, they were mobile quarterbacks that were very reliant on a ground and pound attack first and foremost. Did pass the ball, but they were very much a run first team. I expect the same thing here with Fresno State. EJ Warner could definitely be one of those guys that drops back 50 times. I don't know if offensive coordinator Josh Davis is going to really rely on that, especially in week 0 in a game like this, where ultimately we know the Kansas Jayhawk offense has that quick strike ability to go down the field and score. You don't want to tire out your defense, especially in week 0 in a game where Kansas is coming back to their renovated stadium for the first time in a year. It's going to be a sold out crowd, over 41,000 out there in Lawrence, Kansas. You don't want to get that team and that crowd up and running. You very much want to slow down the game, play a possession type game. And I think Fresno State can actually keep this game close, especially in the first half. I think ultimately Kansas will win this ball game, but I think Fresno is going to keep this thing between a touchdown and 10 points. I really think so, just because of Matt Entz and his coaching style and playing style. I have a whole lot of respect for Matt Entz. We talked to him one-on-one. And this is a guy that is very set in stone on what he wants to do. He brought in, Josh Davis, offensive coordinator. He had that South Dakota Coyote offense humming last year, at the FCS level. So, it might be a little bit of a transition, but the way that they're going to run the ball, I mean, they're gonna be able to do some good things. As far as some things that I'm looking at on the Fresno side, just because of all the things that we've talked about with the Bulldogs and, things within that nature, talking to their players, their team, at Mountain West Media Days. There's little things that I'm looking at as far as the offensive line. Jacob Spalmer, who's been a lifetime Fresno State Bulldog entering his senior campaign. This is his first game at center. We asked him, how's the transition been from left tackle to center? Personally, he said it's been pretty solid. So we're going to see how that goes against a Kansas Jayhawk team in a hostile environment in week 0, when he's going to have, a couple new linemen, especially in left tackle. Braden Walton, true freshman, starting at left tackle. That's a kid that I'll be watching. I've always said, I've said it on broadcast, I've said it on this podcast. across the board. If you're a true freshman and you're starting, I don't care what sport it is, you're doing something right and you're very talented. So Braden Walton is a guy to circle on your depth chart for someone to look at the left tackle position for the Fresno State Bulldogs, just to see how he handles it out there. This is his first collegiate start and his first collegiate game in his career. So, that's going to be a tall task, especially on the road. Like these are some big shoes to fill. And he's taking over a guy in Jacob Spalmer who's shifting to the most important position, one of the most important positions on the offensive line. So that's something I'll be paying a whole lot of attention to, that O-line for Fresno State. And this running back room, look, Rayshawn Luke being listed at the RB2 position, I thought was a little bit interesting. I wasn't at Fresno camp or anything. I haven't talked to people out there in Fresno in a little bit now, but Rayshawn Luke, he must have raised a whole lot of eyebrows to be listed the RB2 job because, they're obviously, they got their guy in Bryson Donaldson, who was great as a freshman last year, but Elijah Gilliam and Jonathan Arsenault are also pretty good as well. And they got tons of carries last year for the Fresno State team. Rayshawn Luke coming over from Arizona. They got like 4 legitimate dudes that can go out in the backfield. So I would be shocked, like, if Fresno is over here slinging it like crazy in this game. I think they're going to very much rely on the offensive line. They're going to run between the left guard and the center or something along those lines. They're going to for sure be running in between Jacob Spalmer. That's for sure. But Fresno State, I mean, they got a really good chance of being in this game because of their ground attack. If it's going early and they're playing keep away with Kansas and Jalen Daniels is all of a sudden on the sidelines for 6+ minutes and Fresno scoring touchdowns, this is a ball game. So, is Fresno going to ultimately win? I don't think so, because I think Kansas, them having Jalen Daniels back and just being on the field a little bit more together, I think will ultimately help, and I think the crowd will actually be a factor in this game. So I will go ahead and say Kansas will win, but this is a game that's definitely going to be hanging in there. I can't wait to see Jason Jacks on the defensive line because I think he's due for a monster year on the D line for Fresno State. And I think the bottom line is here for EJ Warner at quarterback, you can't make mistakes. You just can't. And I think every interception that he throws, over the course of the season, especially if, Fresno's not turning in these games into wins, the fan base might get a little bit loud. And I think all of a sudden, if the offense is scuffling or it's just not looking good as far as the eye test is concerned, there's going to be some chatter about a quarterback change. And, Coach Matt Entz said when EJ Warner ultimately won the job, and that was, hey, it's not a short leash, but we're going to be monitoring this kid and we're going to be making sure that he's out there producing. If not, then we will make a change. And I think that kind of goes, as far as, hey, we got 3 good quarterbacks between Jaden Mandel and Carson Conklin and EJ Warner. All these guys are capable of starting, and if one's not producing, then we might go seek elsewhere and, go try to pull the plug and try to unlock a new puzzle piece here with one of our other quarterbacks. So I think there's going to be pressure all year on EJ Warner or whoever the quarterback is for Fresno to get things done here. And because, look, I think with the talent of the offensive line and the running backs, they should be able to be successful. And I think it's going to ultimately come down to the quarterback. Are you turning over the football, and are you able to run this offense accordingly? If not, it could be problematic. But I got Kansas winning this game anywhere from 3 to 7 points. I think it's going to be close. Idaho State at UNLV. All right. So UNLV, this is their home opener. Well, I mean, it's the season opener for them, but this was a game that was not supposed to be played till week 3. Whole bunch of, Las Vegas, they got a whole bunch of things going on. They had like the Terrence Crawford fight or some malarkey going on at Allegiant Stadium. So they had to move up the game. That's all fine and dandy. Dan Mullen, first coached First game that he's coaching as the UNLV head coach. First game coaching in a couple of years. He was on the set of ESPN. Great dude to talk to. We talked to him at Mountain West Media Days. If you didn't catch that interview, it's out on the channel at the Sports Sentiment on YouTube. Great dude, Dan Mullen. And look, he's got some expectations out here in UNLV. They're only picked second in the preseason polls. Dan Mullen not revealing too much at the quarterback position. I mean, both quarterbacks are going to get run in this game versus the Idaho State Bengals, Idaho State FCS Big Sky team. So UNLV, as you would think, a 3-touchdown favorite in this game plus a field goal. So they're expected to win this game with margin. Just some things I'm looking out for on the UNLV side because I don't think it's going to be close. Granted, I do think Idaho State is going to score some points, but I think UNLV can name their number in this game, 50-plus points. I would believe it. Dan Mullen said both quarterbacks are going to play in the presser this week, Anthony Calandria and Alex Orji. I think Alex Orji is going to go nuts on the ground in this game. Doesn't have the greatest arm, but his strength is definitely, getting off in the open field and turning something 15 yards into 80 yards. He did that a ton at Michigan, and all the Big Ten defenses knew it was coming too. Anthony Calandria, definitely a guy from a quarterback standpoint and just, making all the throws is definitely better than Orji. But Orji is so good with his legs where it's almost like that's why this battle has been so close, having that dual threat capability. So both quarterbacks are definitely going to get some run. I think this game is kind of an audition in a sense for what you're going to see in week 1 at Sam Houston State. So I think it's an interesting dynamic in this game that both quarterbacks are going to go out there and try their hardest, which I think, I'm sorry for Idaho State. That's why I think they're screwed in this game, because whether it's 35-3 in the third quarter and the Rebels are leading and Alex Orji just gets out there in the third quarter, he's going to just turn the wheels loose even more. So I think Idaho State is in a terrible spot here. Like we said, they can score, but they were one of these teams' terrible defense last year in the Big Sky, and they were able to score a bunch of points. Dan Mullen referred to this team as like the 42-35 team every week, and they'd win some and they'd lose some. So I think that should tell you all you need to know as far as this game's concerned. Jet Thomas. I expect a big year out of this kid, running back for the Rebels. He should be able to shred the Bengals on the ground. I would expect north of 100 rushing yards at least for this kid. And I think just overall, he's going to be one of the better running backs in all of the Mountain West this year. I want to see how this wide receiver room is going to look, right? Because they don't have Ricky White. They don't have some of these other kids. Jacob DeJesus, I think, is at Cal now. Like, there's just a bunch of moving parts. Brennan Marion is, the head coach at Sac State now, so it's a new offense. I just want to see how all these pieces mesh with each other. And more importantly, with the skill position players, who's looking more comfortable out there with the quarterback, right? Because I think that will also, when you get onto these 11-on-11 snaps, even if it's against an FCS defense, like if I see D'Angelo Irvin look better with Anthony Calandria and the mesh point look better with Calandria compared to Orji, I think that's going to matter. So, I want to see what those wide receivers look like first and foremost, especially a guy like D'Angelo Irvin, because he's a guy that is expected to do a whole lot of things for this team, and he's only got like 4 career catches. So I just want to see these kids take the field and see how comfortable they look out there. There's a lot of new faces on offense, generally speaking, for UNLV. And on the flip side, look, this is a brand new defense with Paul Gunther, right? Zach Arnett was supposed to take this team. He had to step down a few months ago. We asked Jake Pope about it, their safety, the Rebels safety. And he said, yeah, it's been a difficult transition, but Paul Gunther's a guy that I trust to make things happen, and we trust him to call the right plays, and we're just going to go out there and execute. He said all the right things, but he ultimately admitted that, maybe in a sense we're a little bit behind on things. So, I think it's good that UNLV's got this first game versus Idaho State, because now they could go show on tape what they're all about, and, they just ultimately want to go hit somebody. I mean, at least that's what Jake Pope said, and I don't blame him. He's a safety. He wants to go out there and make a play. It's definitely nice that UNLV gets this first game versus Idaho State in a game that they're going to win with margin. And then all of a sudden, then you can transition into Sam Houston. You could get away with the missed tackle here and there, and yes, you're probably going to get picked on about it in the film room, but it'll be one of those games where, hey, we're going to get called out on it, but it will ultimately result in a win. So that's what I'm looking for on UNLV side. I think this game, from the final score, will be lopsided. I think it'll be a track meet. It'll probably be like 52-17 or something like that. UNLV fans will have a nice little cocktail party with all the kids in the stands out there literally on the field, like on the goal line and stuff. So interested to see that on the UNLV side at Allegiant Stadium. Transitioning into our Conference USA game, Sam Houston State and Western Kentucky. Now, this is a game that I'm very excited for. Simply because we got two high-flying offenses that are going to be coming in to Bowling Green, Kentucky, and just letting it rip. I always get excited for these games, and for the most part, it kind of happens out in like Conference USA or the Sun Belt, or sometimes you'll see it here and there in the MAC, where the game's going to be projected to have a lot of points, and then the game delivers to have a lot of points. I think that's exactly what we have in this game between Sam Houston State and Western Kentucky. We'll start out with the Sam Houston side. This team was terrific last year. Awesome 2024 season. They went 10-3 overall. They were 22nd in scoring. Defense. Their defense was terrific. They had wins at Rice, home against Hawaii. They beat Texas State on a neutral, which was very impressive. They were a massive underdog in the game, and then they wrapped up their season with a New Orleans Bowl victory versus Georgia Southern. The problem with this team, as far as Sam Houston State last year, was they were 102nd in scoring offense. They were great defensively and not the greatest offensively. And that's why they were 10-3, not only because the Conference USA was an absolute joke last year and they had a bunch of teams that were allergic to the end zone, but they were just able to ugly up these games just enough to win. Like, I think they won 9-3 versus Louisiana Tech last year. They were winning games like that, especially towards the back end of Conference USA play. But their head coach leaves. Casey Keeler, who great head coach, by the way. For the most part, his teams like to run the ball like crazy, which was the strength to Sam Houston State. They were very much a run-first team last year, to say the least. They were like 80% run, 20% pass last year, and it worked in the Conference USA. And his defenses were really good. Now, they bring a whole lot of pieces. A whole lot of pieces leave. Casey Keeler departs for the Temple Owls head coaching job. Here comes Phil Longo into the equation. Now, Phil Longo, he's entering year one in Huntsville. He comes over from Wisconsin. He was the offensive coordinator over there. What does this guy love to do? What's his bread and butter? Air raid. Loves to throw the football, which I would say was, why did Wisconsin not work? Wisconsin loves to play the ground and pound game. It just would never seem to work at Wisconsin, that they were going to decide all of a sudden, hey, we're this ground and pound team and we're going to out physical everybody. It's the Big Ten. And then they just turn into this air raid offense. No, that's not the Wisconsin Badgers. Phil Longo was at North Carolina prior to that a few years back, and his offenses were electric, with just scoring points like crazy. So now Wisconsin doesn't work out. He significantly downgrades to Conference USA, and I think this offense is going to be really good. Now, the Bearcats, very uncertain at the quarterback position between Hunter Watson and Mabry Methauer. Now, Phil Longo, the head coach for Sam Houston, said, you're going to wait and see who our quarterback is, which you got to love when the coaches say that. They're not going to reveal all too much. Western Kentucky is certainly game planning for Hunter Watson, which if I were the defensive coordinator at WKU, that's who I would be game planning for personally, especially since you got a whole year of tape on him because he was at Sam Houston State last year. But this is a team that I'm very excited to see how they mesh in this week 0 game, because Phil Longo, like we said, runs the air raid. This team should be a polar opposite of what they looked like offensively last year. They bring back some pieces at the wide receiver position. But again, the wide receiver position wasn't really the strength to this team. Quavez, Humphreys, and Michael Phoenix will probably be your wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2 for the Bearcats. And Elijah Green, this is a kid that I expect to have a big year in the backfield. Actually played with Longo in 2022 at North Carolina, had 500 plus yards. I'd expect him to be the lead back and for him to have a monster year. So I think Sam Houston State is going to put up a jillion points, just over the course of the season. I expect this offense, for the fact that they were 102nd in scoring offense, this is a team where I'd expect them to take massive leaps in that area. Now, 22nd in scoring defense, I would say that takes a significant downgrade because they got 0 returning starters back on the roster. Back on that 22nd ranked defense in America. All the kids went to North Texas and Temple, rightfully so. You follow Casey Keeler, and I think their defensive coordinator went to North Texas. So, and another thing is, not that it's going to apply to this game, but I think the year 1 might be just a little bit of a struggle. Like Sam Houston might be one of these teams that just kind of loses a lot of close games, especially because they're not going to have a home field advantage this year because their stadium's getting renovated. So they're going to be playing in Houston, Texas, which from Huntsville to Houston's like an hour. So I think that's a little bit of a disadvantage. If you're a Bearcat fan and you're a Bearcat player and you're just on this staff, just because you're not going to have that home crowd. Look, home crowds matter in college, people. Like, whether it's the NFL or whatever, like NFL home field advantage. I don't want to get on this tangent right now, but the NFL over the years, like the home field advantage has not really meant that much. College is a completely different animal, right? Just because I just feel like the crowds are a little bit more authentic and the kids are a little bit more louder, and you throw in the bands and everything else in between, it just makes more of an authentic and rambunctious atmosphere. So I think that ultimately matters. I don't care if, it's Conference USA and it's not the SEC and the crowds are, the stadiums are 2 times bigger and the kids are 10 times more drunk. I think anytime you're not playing at home in a field that you practice, I think that doesn't help. So that's a little bit of a downside for Sam Houston State this year, but I think they're going to be a fun team to watch. For a team that scores a jillion points and gives up a jillion points, those are fun teams to watch. It's not the greatest brand of football, but those are just fun teams generally to watch and monitor over the course of the season. And I think that's what we have in Sam Houston. Now, the beauty of this thing, on the flip side, you got a Western Kentucky team who's pretty much the exact same team in that sense. Terrible defensively, great offensively. And that goes back to like the last 5 years with this team. Western Kentucky last year, 8-6 overall. They went to the Conference USA championship game, going back to our point on terrible defense. Well, on the CUSA championship game, only lost 52-12 versus Jacksonville State. The Hilltoppers were one of the worst rush defenses in the country last year. They were like allowing over north of 200 rushing yards a game, which everybody knew about. And Jacksonville State, who had Rich Rodriguez as their head coach, who runs that crazy, option offense, and they're going to run the ball 90%, 95% of the time and run it down your throat, nearly like the triple option, but in a sense, not really, not the exact, same scheme. But Jack State under Rich Rod always loves to run the ball. And what was the massive downside to the Hilltoppers last year? They couldn't stop a running back and couldn't tackle a running back to save their lives last year. Now, do I expect things to change? They got a massive overhaul on defense. So you could expect maybe those numbers to improve a little bit just because it can't get much worse. They were like 131st in the FBS last year, and there was only like 132 teams as far as, the rushing defense is concerned. So it can only get better. Now, offensively, this is a team where, they got some overhaul here. They got the OC leaving. They got the quarterback leaving. They got some wide receivers dipping out. But the players and the personnel that they brought in have me really intrigued. because the offensive coordinator, Zach Kittley, who's been here for like the past 4 or 5 years in Bowling Green, he departs for the Florida Atlantic head coaching job, who, by the way, he's the youngest head coach in the FBS, which I thought was pretty interesting. But Zach Kittley, who came from Houston Baptist, coached under with Bailey Zappi, from Houston Baptist in the COVID year to coming over to Western Kentucky and just setting the college football world on fire. And like, I think Bailey Zappi still has the FBS record for most passing touchdowns in the season with like 64 or something ridiculous. But Zach Kittley's gone. This was a quarterback whisperer under the air raid that was very good. Now he's going to Boca Raton. He took his quarterback, Caden Veltkamp, who was on this Western Kentucky team last year with them. So who did Tyson Helton bring in, the head coach for the Hilltoppers? He brings in Rick Bowie, offensive coordinator at Abilene Christian at the FCS level, and he brings the quarterback with them from Abilene Christian, Maverick McIver. Both of these guys have that on and off the field chemistry. They're going to just bring this air raid offense that they were running at Abilene Christian and just plug and play it to Western Kentucky. So I like that a lot. You got a Maverick McIver and Rick Bowie, who know each other very well. They were gunslingers at Abilene Christian. They threw the ball 560 times last year. That was second at the FCS ranks. They averaged 470 yards per game, 35 points per game. Heck, they were last year in week 1. They lost 52-51 at Texas Tech. So they can hang with the big dogs. And they had a significant talent gap. Compared to, Abilene Christian as Texas Tech. What would you expect? So look, I expect this offense to hit the ground running. Now, the wide receivers didn't come from Abilene. They're kind of spread from all over the place. But we've seen with Tyson Helton that he gets hit by the portal because these wide receivers are so good in the scheme. And this is a coach that reloads, finds the right combinations, finds the right play caller, quarterback, the wide receivers that fit within, the quarterback strengths, and they go out there and score points and win football games. Because it's Tyson Helton. This is one of the more, I would say, underappreciated head coaches. Like Western Kentucky is not the most easiest job in the world, and he has them consistently competing in Conference USA. Like he's always in the championship game. We're always flirting with it every single year. He's 48-32. That's his record lifetime as a head coach out here in Bowling Green, which I would say is pretty damn good. I mean, his only losing record was in 2020, which, that's kind of just 2020 was a terrible year for everybody. So this is kind of just one of those underappreciated head coaching jobs. I'm very just interested to just watch this team every single week just because of the Maverick McIver edition, because I think this kid's going to be good and just fit right in Conference USA at the FBS level. CUSA is no good, from a strength of schedule standpoint. If they're clicking offensively, they should be able to outscore some of these teams, because I would say about 40 to 60% of these teams, wide range, but 40 to 60% of these teams just can't hang with an offense like that in this conference, especially because there's a lot of first and second year coaches that are still trying to get, their team and their players and recruiting and the talent all meshed together. So I think Western Kentucky is going to have a good year. I think they're going to be in the Conference USA championship game. I'd have this team power ranked second behind Liberty. I think Liberty, the Flames, are due for a bounce back season under Jamie Chadwell, but I like this team a lot. As far as the Western Kentucky Sam Houston State game, I wouldn't expect a whole lot of defense. I'd expect this thing to be a shootout. I'd expect Western Kentucky, the Hilltoppers defense, to be a little bit better than Sam Houston's, because Sam Houston's got no returning starters, and I think it's just going to take a lot of time with this team from a defensive perspective, but I'd just expect a whole lot of points in this game. I think Vegas has this thing projected at 60-something points. I would say this thing could be anywhere from, this could be a 38-30 type game, and it wouldn't shock me at all. Something along those lines, but I think Western Kentucky is going to win this thing probably by a touchdown. I think it could be close. If Sam Houston State's offense is looking good and Hunter Watson is able to navigate the air raid, because going from going from that Casey Keeler team last year, I mean, they were hardly throwing the ball unless it was like 3rd and long. And now he's going to be throwing the ball on 1st, 2nd, and 3rd down. And if it's 4th and 3, they're throwing it probably too. So it's a massive change in scheme. You go from being under center a lot and handing it off to the running back to all of a sudden, hey, you're going to be in the shotgun the whole time, and we're going and we're playing fast. So I'm very interested to see how these two offenses look, just because there's some adjustments within the quarterbacks. There's some new quarterbacks. There's a brand new OC out there in Bowling Green, and I think ultimately it's going to return it. It's going to turn into some offenses that are clicking and some defenses that are going to be a little bit behind. And I'd expect a very entertaining game in that one. All right, final ball game, Stanford and Hawaii. This is a game that I'm excited to see, just because I can't wait to see that Hawaii team. If you haven't been keeping up with the Stanford Cardinal this year, this is a team that's projected to be one of the bottom teams in the Power 5 and the Power 4 level out there in the ACC conference. Still feels weird to say that Stanford's in the ACC, but they're in the ACC conference. Stanford's projected to finish last. I would put them last. They're starting Ben Gulbranson at quarterback, the Oregon State transfer who's been in college for like 6 to 7 years now. Look, I don't expect Stanford to be very good. All the media people think so. I certainly believe so. I've seen Ben Gulbranson plenty of times now. I saw him live at Research Stadium when San Jose State played Oregon State last year, and the Spartan defense terrorized him. This is a guy, and I've talked about it. He went 7-1 as a starter a few years ago when the Beavers had their magical season, I believe. Or the Beavers actually had back-to-back good seasons. But Ben Gulbranson went like 7-1 as a starter, and like he was terrific. He had an A+ offensive line. Like they were a Joe Moore Award finalist. He had Damian Martinez, who's killing it at the NFL camps right now. Like he had a whole lot of good stuff around him. He had good wide receivers. He had Silas Bolden, who was at Texas last year. Like he had a whole lot of talent with him in the Jonathan Smith era. And that ultimately led to his success. This is just kind of one of those system quarterbacks that kind of needs all A+ O-line, A+ weapons to be successful. Stanford is nowhere near that. I would say Stanford, their strength is maybe their offensive line, but they probably have a bunch of new pieces there. I was looking at their depth chart and I was like, okay, I kind of like Micah Ford and Cole Tab the best. Because I don't know what I'm going to get at the wide receiver position from this team. Alec Iomander's not here anymore. We'll see what CJ Williams is all about. He's played at a couple big-time schools, so I'm interested to just see what they look like. I think they're going to rely on running the ball, because I don't think you can trust Gulbranson to make like 40 dropbacks like in a game, which I would not believe at all. So I would expect Stanford to kind of set the tone here, especially the way Hawaii, like the way that offense is going to run this year, and the run and shoot, and under Timmy Chang in year 4, and the confidence within that group. Stanford, if you want to keep this game close, you got to play keep away, and you better hope that Micah Ford and Cole Tab are finding the lanes, moving the sticks, killing the clock, drilling the clock, and scoring touchdowns, and playing keep away from Micah Alejado. Because if that's not the case, and you're relying solely on Ben Gulbranson to deliver it to the receivers or dump it off to Sam Roush and Benji Blackburn, this is going to be a long day for the Stanford Cardinal. Defensively, Stanford was good in some spots last year. I mean, the Syracuse game really jumps off the page. They were able to hang around, like able to stop SMU in their one home ACC win last year. There's just not a whole lot to like here from Stanford. They got Frank Reich, interim head coach. Like he's never really coached at the collegiate level ever. He's just trying to make the best out of what's a very difficult situation for this team. And I think Hawaii, look, like this is a team, we talk to their players, we talk to their coach. There is expectations to do things out there on the island this year. It's year 4. you got to get to a bowl game. And that's been the one thing I've heard out there in Hawaii. We might not win the league. Offensively, they might be one of the better teams offensively in the league, just the way that they sling the football and the way that they're going to hum offensively. But the big time goal for this team is to get to the 6-win mark. And I think they do. Defensively, they bring a whole lot of players back. Like, I really like, the returners. Now it's one of these things like, okay, like the defense wasn't great last year, but at the same time, the offense wasn't either. So they were on the field a lot. But Peter Panuma, I'd expect him a big year in at the safety position to do some big things. They like him a lot. Jemai Otis, who really just seems the leader of that defense. I would expect him, the junior, to make some big plays wearing number 11 in the green unis. And offensively, I mean, this is kind of where it all starts. You bring back Landon Sims and Cam Barfield in the backfield. Micah Alejado, the confidence is off the charts with this kid. He's only a redshirt freshman. He very small sample size with the kid, tore it up at against New Mexico on the island, scored like 40 points, had like almost 400 yards of offense passing. Like, this kid is legit, can sling it. Braden Shager, there was always kind of like a ceiling to what he can bring to the table. So I think it just seems like Hawaii's got their guy now. And that's just kind of the sense that I get, from the people I talk to, and the players that I've talked to, and the coach that I've talked to. Not to mention Pofele Ashlock and Nick Sanical, like that 1-2 tandem at the wide receiver position. Like, it's going to be up there, like, as far as like 1-2 punches in the Mountain West this year. Like, it's going to be very good. So I'd expect some big things out of those two guys. Ashlock was a great conversation at Media Day. So, look, Stanford, underdogs in this game. Hawaii on the island. It's week 0. They've played in tons of week 0 games before. Stanford's got to come to them. I talked to the players. They said, hey, we remember the game 2 years ago when they came to the island and beat us. We remember that. So I like Hawaii, I would say, by a little bit in this game. Not, I would say they're not going to take Stanford to the woodshed or anything, because I do believe that there's going to be some points in this game where Hawaii, in a game that they're supposed to win, are going to learn and figure out that how to win these games. In games that you're favored, you got to be able to go out there and win it. And, that was a little bit of a struggle for them last year. Like, I remember when Delaware State came onto the island and they were trailing in that game, like by like 10 points. Like, these are games that Hawaii's got to figure out. I think they're going to actually go through it a little bit, especially in the first half. Like, this game's going to be a little bit like, it's going to be hanging there for a little bit, but I expect Hawaii to pull away. I think ultimately they'll win by anywhere from 7 to 10 points in this one. I would be shocked. Well, actually, I wouldn't be shocked, like, if Stanford got shredded in this game, but I think it's a good learning experience for this team that, again, there's not really it's not too often in these spots where they're favored over a Power 4 team, and that's just kind of the circumstances of where these teams are at right now. But I think it'll be a good learning lesson for Hawaii. I think it'll be an uphill battle for Stanford. If Stanford wants to make this a game in the fourth quarter, they will have to do it a certain way. And I just think if Hawaii is on the field for a long time, their offense is going, and that Stanford defense is hanging out to dry, and their offense is doing no favors, it could be a long day for the Cardinal. So that's where we're at with week 0. I've been looking at the same slate for a long time, so we've kind of done a lot of nosediving on these teams to see where they're at in week 0. But hey, we got 3 Mountain West teams playing, which is always pretty fun. We got 2 Big 12 teams playing. We got 2 conference games, one a rivalry game between, Iowa State and Kansas State, and, the Conference USA clash between Sam Houston State and Western Kentucky. So it's a whole lot of fun out here. We can't wait for college football to start. I most certainly can't wait until, we watch these games, we come back and look at the results of these games, and then we get on to week 1, which is ultimately, this is a nice appetizer. But week 1 next week will be the main event. And then we'll have, just the revolving door of different matchups and, out of conference games where they could be lopsided, but you still have your premier games. And then, of course, your fun games between the MAC, the Sun Belt, the fun non-conference rivalry games that I'm interested to see and watch and, bring to the table here on this podcast. So come along for the ride. We're going to be broadcasting games for San Jose State this fall out on 90.5 KSJS. So we'll be doing select home games for them. And look, we're going to be watching games all weekend long. It's the football season's here. So we're going to talk about it. We'll be doing some live streams in between during the week to talk about some matchups. We're going to be doing game previews over the course of the season for San Jose State. So if you're not on board, like, comment, subscribe. We're going to be here all season long talking football, giving my analysis. We're going to have guests along the way. This is all a part of the fun. So we can't wait. We're less than 72 hours away, and we're ready for, ultimately just to kick things off here. So that will do it for this episode of the Sports Sentiment. Once again, I am your host, Nick Urias, and be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.